Al-Ghazali. A Short Biography. Section 1. Introduction. In the bloom of my youth, and the prime of my life, from the time I reached puberty, before I was 20 until now, when I am over 50, I have continually dived, daringly, into the depths of this profound sea, and waded into its deep water like a bold man, not a cautious coward. I would penetrate far into every murky mystery, pounce upon every problem, and dash into every mazy difficulty. I would scrutinize the creed of every sect, and seek to lay bare the secrets of each faction's teaching with the aim of discriminating between the proponent of truth and the advocate of error, and between the faithful follower of tradition and the heterodox innovator. Section 2. As a student, Imam as-Subki quoted Abdul Ghaffar al-Farisi, who wrote the biography of Al-Ghazali, saying, during his childhood in Ois, Al-Ghazali acquired some knowledge in jurisprudence from the Imam, Ahmad al-Rathkani. Then he went to Nisapur, where, with a group of youths from Ois, he frequented the lectures of the Imam al-Aramain al-Juwayni. He worked so hard and with such seriousness that he finished his studies in a short time. He outstripped his fellows, mastered the Quran, and became the best scholar of the men of his time, and matchless among his fellows in the days of the Imam al-Juwayni. The students used to derive profit from him, and he would instruct them and guide them, and work hard himself in establishing independent judgments. He finally reached the point that he began to compose his own works. By this time, Al-Ghazali mastered jurisprudence, according to Ash-Shafi'i school and the principles of jurisprudence, such that he was not only able to teach them and substitute for his teacher, he was also able to write books in these fields. One of his most famous, An Introduction to the Principles of Jurisprudence, was written at this time. It is called Siftings from the Knowledge of Foundations, Al-Manqul min al-Usul. He also learned theology, according to the Ash'ari method, dialectic argumentation, the ethics of disagreement, and discourse. Section 3. Imam, and Professor. Al-Ghazali desired more knowledge, and though he wanted to study beyond his teacher, but he continued until the teacher died. Then Al-Ghazali left Nisapur, and went to the camp and was officially welcomed by Nidam ul-Mulk, who took an interest in Al-Ghazali because of his high rank, conspicuous name, excellence in disputation, and his command of expression. His excellency was the stopping place of the scholars, ulama kama, and the goal of imams and literary men. So there befell Al-Ghazali some fine encounters with the imams. In addition, he met tough adversaries, disputed with luminaries, argued with distinguished scholars, while his name became known in distant lands. He took the fullest advantage of that until circumstances led to his appointment to Baghdad, where he took charge of the teaching at the Nidamiyya school there. In Baghdad, the center of Islamic civilization, Al-Ghazali actualized his rational skills fully. In Baghdad his teaching and disputation delighted everyone and he met no one like himself. And after holding the imamate of Khorasan he became the Imam of Iraq. While there, he spent most of his time disputing opponents about issues in jurisprudence, theology, philosophy, and religion. He also wrote and published books there. Then he looked into the science of the principles of jurisprudence, and when he had mastered it he wrote scholarly books on that science. And he studied the legal school of jurisprudence, Ash-Shafi'i, and wrote books on it. And he studied Al-Allaf, the branch dealing with differences in matters of jurisprudence, and also wrote new books on that. During this time, he read the philosophers, Al-Ghazali was not satisfied intellectually with the metaphysics of Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, and Aristotle. He criticized them systematically in his most celebrated book, The Incoherence of the Philosophers, Tahafut al-Falasifa. Before publishing this book, Al-Ghazali published his book The Objectives of the Philosophers, in which he summarized the ideas of the philosophers with no criticism. He also published a book on logic. His books on the principles of jurisprudence, on Islamic theology, ethics, philosophy, and jurisprudence, are still in use at our present time as textbooks in many universities. His rank and admiration in Baghdad became so great that it surpassed the admiration of the nobles, and the princes, and the residents of the Caliph. Section 4, Al-Ghazali on methodological doubt. 2 months of self-dialogue on epistemological issues. In his book, The Deliverance from Error, Al-Ghazali said, "The thirst for grasping the real meaning of things was indeed my habit, and won't, from my early years and in the prime of my life. It was an instinctive, natural disposition, placed in my makeup by God Most High, not something due to my own choosing and contriving. As a result, the fetters of servile conformism fell away from me, and inherited beliefs lost their hold on me. When I was still quite young, while he was teaching at Nidamiyya University in Baghdad, Al-Ghazali was questioning the epistemological foundation, the true meaning of things, and certainty. He said, I saw that the children of Christians always grew up embracing Christianity, and the children of Jews always grew up adhering to Judaism, and the children of Muslims always grew up following the religion of Islam. I also heard the tradition related from the Prophet, God's blessing and peace be upon him, in which he said, every infant is born endowed with fitra, intuitive ability to know God. Then his parents make him Jew or Christian or Magian. Consequently, I felt an inner urge to seek the true meaning of the original fitra, and the true meaning of the beliefs arising through slavish aping of parents and teachers. I wanted to sift out these uncritical beliefs, the beginnings of which are suggestions imposed from without, since there are differences of opinion in the discernment of those that are true from those that are false. So, I began by saying to myself, what I seek is knowledge of the true meaning of things, of necessity. Therefore, I must inquire into just what the true meaning of knowledge is. Then it became clear to me that sure and certain knowledge is that in which the thing known is made so manifest that no doubt clings to it, nor is it accompanied by the possibility of error and deception, nor can the mind even suppose such a possibility. Furthermore, safety from error must accompany the certainty to such a degree that, if someone proposed to show it to be false, for example, a man who would turn a stone into gold, and a stick into a snake, this feat would not induce any doubt or denial. I realized, then, that whatever I did not know in this way, and was not certain of with this kind of certainty, was unreliable and unsure knowledge, and that every knowledge unaccompanied by safety from error, is not sure and certain knowledge. I then scrutinized all my cognitions, and found myself devoid of any knowledge answering the previous description except in the case of sense data and the self-evident truths. Therefore, I began to reflect on my sense data, to see if I could make myself doubt them. This protracted effort to induce doubt finally brought me to the point where my soul would not allow me to admit safety from error, even in the case of my sense data. Then, I said, my reliance on sense data has also become untenable. Perhaps, therefore, I can rely only on those rational data which belong to the category of primary truths, such as are asserting that 10 is more than 3. and one and the same thing cannot be simultaneously affirmed and denied. Then sensed data spoke up. What assurance have you that your reliance on rational data is not like your reliance on sensed data? Indeed, you used to have confidence in me. Then the reason judge came along and gave me the lie. So there may be, beyond the perception of reason, another judge. And if the latter revealed itself, it would give the lie to the judgments of reason. The mere fact of the non-appearance of that further perception does not prove the impossibility of its existence. It may be that the state beyond reason is, that which the Sufis claim is theirs. For they allege that, in the states they experience when they concentrate inwardly and suspend sensation, they see phenomena which are not in accord with the normal data of reason. Or it may be that this state is death. For the Prophet, God's blessing and peace be upon him, said, "Men are asleep, then after they die they awake." So perhaps this present life is asleep compared to the afterlife. When these thoughts occurred to me, they penetrated my soul. And so I tried to deal with that objection. However, my effort was unsuccessful. This malady was mysterious. And it lasted for nearly 2 months. During that time I was a skeptic in fact, but not in utterance and doctrine. At length, God Most High cured me of that sickness. My soul regained its health and equilibrium. And once again I accepted the self-evident data of reason, and relied on them with safety and certainty. But that was not achieved by constructing a proof, or putting together an argument. On the contrary, it was the effect of a light which God Most High cast into my breast. And that light is the key to most knowledge. Therefore, whoever thinks that the unveiling of truth depends on precisely formulated proofs, has indeed straitened the broad mercy of God. When the Prophet, God's blessing and peace be upon him, was asked about the dilation in the Most High's utterance. So he whom God wishes to guide aright, he dilates his breast for submission to himself. Quran 6:125. The Prophet said, "It is a light which God casts into the heart." Then someone said, "And what is the sign of it?" He replied, "Withdrawal from the mansion of delusion and turning to the mansion of immortality." The aim of this account is to emphasize that one should be most diligent in seeking the truth, until he finally comes to see the unseekable. Section 5, Al-Ghazali on Spiritual Journey. 6 months of self-debate before leaving Baghdad. Al-Ghazali's mind was not satisfied with his position, fame, and material success. He sought the realm of knowledge beyond that. He found that man is not mere intellect. Man is a spiritual being and should pursue spiritual progress. Al-Ghazali came to understand that inner harmony, the heart, life after death, and the state of one's soul, are the truly essential matters worthy of devotion and study. His life changed. His soul was restless. He left his position in Baghdad, and went on a 10-year journey to satisfy this call from within, to live in harmony. In his book, The Deliverance from Error, Al-Ghazali said, "I had learned all I could by way of theory. There remained, then, only what was attainable, not by hearing and study, but by fruitional experience, and actually engaging in the way. From the sciences which I had practiced, and the methods which I had followed in my inquiry into the two kinds of knowledge, revealed and rational, I had already acquired a sure and certain faith in God Most High, in the prophetic mediation of revelation, and in the last day. These three fundamentals of our faith had become deeply rooted in my soul, not because of any specific, precisely formulated proofs, but because of reasons, and circumstances, and experiences too many to list in detail. It had already become clear to me, that my only hope of attaining beatitude in the afterlife, lay in piety and restraining my soul from passion. The beginning of all that, I knew, was to sever my heart's attachment to the world by withdrawing from this abode of delusion and turning to the mansion of immortality, and devoting myself with total ardor to God Most High. That, I knew, could be achieved only by shunning fame and fortune, and fleeing from my preoccupations and attachments. Next, I attentively considered my circumstances, and I saw that I was immersed in attachments which had encompassed me from all sides. I also considered my activities, the best of them being public and private instruction, and saw that in them, I was applying myself to sciences unimportant and useless in this pilgrimage to the hereafter. Then, I reflected on my intention in my public teaching, and I saw that it was not directed purely to God, but rather was instigated and motivated by the quest for fame and widespread prestige. So I became certain that I was on the brink of a crumbling bank, and already on the verge of falling into the fire, unless I set about mending my ways. I therefore reflected unceasingly on this for some time, while I still had freedom of choice. One day I would firmly resolve to leave Baghdad, and disengage myself from those circumstances, and another day I would revoke my resolution. I would put one foot forward, and the other backward. In the morning I would have a sincere desire to seek the things of the afterlife, but by evening the hosts of passion would assail it and render it lukewarm. Mundane desires began tugging me with their chains to remain as I was, while the herald of faith was crying out, "Away! Up and away! Only a little is left of your life, and a long journey lies before you. All the theory and practice in which you are engrossed is pretension and fraud. If you do not prepare now for the afterlife, when will you do so? And if you do not sever these attachments now, then when will you sever them?" At such thoughts the call would reassert itself, and I would make an irrevocable decision to run off and escape. Then Satan would return to the attack and say, "This is a passing state. Beware, then, of yielding to it, for it will quickly vanish. Once you have given into it, and given up your present renown and splendid position free from vexation, and renounced your secure situation untroubled by the contention of your adversaries, your soul might again look longingly at all that, but it would not be easy to return to it." Thus, I incessantly vacillated between the contending pull of worldly desires and the appeals of the afterlife for about 6 months, starting with Rajab of the year 488, July 1095 AD. In this month the matter passed from choice to compulsion, for God put a lock upon my tongue, so that I was impeded from public teaching. I struggled with myself to teach for a single day, to gratify the hearts of the students who were frequenting my lectures. But my tongue would not utter a single word. I was completely unable to say anything. As a result, that impediment of my speech caused a sadness in my heart, accompanied by an inability to digest. Food and drink became unpalatable to me, so that I could neither swallow broth easily nor digest a mouthful of solid food. That led to such a weakening of my powers, that the physicians lost hope of treating me, and said, "This is something which has settled in his heart and crept from it into his humors. There is no way to treat it unless his heart be eased of the anxiety which has visited it." Then, when I perceived my powerlessness, and when my capacity to make a choice had completely collapsed, I had recourse to God Most High, as does a hard-pressed man who has no way out of his difficulty. And I was answered by him, who answers the needy man when he calls on him, Quran 27:63-62. And he made it easy for my heart to turn away from fame and fortune, family, children, and associates. I announced that I had resolved to leave for Mecca. all the while planning secretly to travel to Syria. This I did as a precaution, lest the Caliph and the group of my associates might learn of my resolve to settle in Damascus. Section 6. 10 years of solitude. Departing from Baghdad. I departed from Baghdad, after I had distributed what wealth I had, laying by only the amount needed for my support, and the sustenance of my children. Damascus, to Beit al-Maqdis, Palestine, to Mecca. Then I entered Damascus, and resided there for nearly 2 years. My only occupation was seclusion and solitude, and spiritual exercise, and combat with a view to devoting myself to the purification of my soul, and the cultivation of virtues, and cleansing my heart for the remembrance of God Most High, in the way I had learned from the writings of the Sufis. I used to pray in seclusion for a time in the mosque, mounting to its minaret for the whole day and shutting myself in. Then I traveled from Damascus to Beit al-Maqdis, where I would go daily into the dome of the rock and shut myself in. Then I was inwardly moved by an urge to perform the duty of the pilgrimage, and to draw succor from the blessings of Mecca and Medina. After finishing my visit, I traveled to the Hijaz, Mecca to Baghdad. Then certain concerns, and the appeals of my children drew me to my native land. So I came back to it, after being the person most unlikely to return to it. There, I also chose seclusion out of a desire for solitude, and the purification of my heart for the remembrance of God. But current events and important family matters and gaining the necessities for daily living had an effect on the way to realize my desire and troubled the serenity of my solitude, and the pure state of ecstasy occurred only intermittently. But nonetheless I did not cease to aspire to it. Obstacles would keep me away from it, but I would return to it. For 10 years, I remained in that condition. In the course of those periods of solitude, things impossible to enumerate or detail in depth were disclosed to me. This much I shall mention, that profit may be derived from it. I knew with certainty that the Sufis are those who uniquely follow the way to God Most High. Their mode of life is the best of all, their way the most direct of ways, and their ethic the purest. Indeed, were one to combine the insight of the intellectuals, the wisdom of the wise, and the lore of scholars versed in the mysteries of revelation in order to change a single item of Sufi conduct and ethic and to replace it with something better, no way to do so would be found. For all their motions and quiescence, exterior and interior, are learned from the light of the niche of prophecy. And beyond the light of prophecy, there is no light on earth from which illumination can be obtained. During the 10 years of solitude, Al-Ghazali began to compose the renowned work, The Revival of the Religious Sciences, Ihya Ulum ad-Din, and the books abridged therefrom, and other treatises which, if one reflects on them, will explain man's place in relation to the branches of learning. During this journey, Al-Ghazali was able to battle against his self, regulate his character, improve his qualities, and rectify his lifestyle. Thus, the devil of frivolity, desire for leadership and fame, and bad qualities were transformed in his serene soul into noble qualities. He did away with outward forms and rites, and took on the apparel of the godly, and reduced his hopes and aspirations for worldly things. He devoted his time to guiding men, and summoning them to matters of the afterlife, to making worldly preoccupations hateful, and to preparing for the departure to the everlasting abode. Section 7. The Return. After this journey, he returned to his home and devoted himself to the truth in both theory and practice. He returned to his native land, where he kept fast to his house, preoccupied himself with meditation, tenaciously guarded his time, This went on for some time, while his works appeared and his books circulated. Then, Al-Ghazali was invited to teach in the Nidamiyya school in Nisapur, and aimed at guiding the trained educated, and benefiting the seekers of learning. How often was he attacked by opposition? He faced defamation, calumniation, slander, and vilification regarding what he did, or did not do. But he was unaffected by it, and did not busy himself with answering the slanderers. Nor did he manifest any distress at the calumny of the confused. Then, close friends asked him how he had come to wish to leave his house and to return to what he was summoned to, viz. the business of Nisapur. In defense of that he said, "According to my religion, I could not conceivably hold back from the summons, and the utility of benefiting the seekers of knowledge. It was indeed imperative for me to disclose the truth, and to speak of it and to call people to it." In fact, he was truthful in that. Then he forsook that before being himself forsaken, and returned to his house. He set up nearby a school, madrasa, for the seekers of knowledge, and a place of sojourn, khanqah, a kind of monastic dwelling, for the Sufis. He apportioned his time among tasks such as reciting the Quran, keeping company with the men of hearts, and sitting down to teach, so that not a single one of his moments, or the moments of those with him, was profitless. This went on until time caught up to him, and the days were begrudged to him. Then God transferred him to his gracious proximity, after he had endured the various attacks of his adversaries. He passed to the mercy of God on Monday, the 14th of Jamada II, in the year 505 after Hijrah, December 18, 1111 AD. Al-Ghazali. A short biography. Section 1. Introduction.